So my name is Marquetta Atkins. I'm the founder and executive director of Destination Innovation, Inc., which is a hub of youth leadership and development. I'm a firm believer that if you want to do any kind of great change, you have to start with the roots. So I always say if you want to cultivate good fruit, you start with the roots, and that's the reason why I work with young people. What we do at Destination Innovation, Inc., is we have 3 programs. So we have Camp Destination Innovation, Inc., which teaches kids about entrepreneurship, economics, and STEM. We have Progeny, which works with youth touched by the juvenile justice system. We are youth passionate about juvenile justice reform. We teach them advocacy, how to change policy in a way it impacts them in leadership. And then we have Root the Power, and Root the Power is our civic engagement group. So those young people are out there teaching young people how to get engaged and empowered in their voice if they don't have the right to vote just yet. They're also holding big kind of, I'm losing my language, guys, I apologize. But they're also hosting big events that bring people together. Like if you're running for office, they hold those panel discussions and talk with those people that are running for office so that young people can get an understanding in layman's terms who does what and how they impact community. Every election season, we host a party at the courthouse, and we call it the Vote Mob. And so what we do is we have young people come out, and they speak about issues that are important to them. We have kid bands out there. We give away free tacos. And the most important thing is we line up all our first-time voters in front of us, and we go vote together. The reason why I'm doing this is all interconnected. So when you think about entrepreneurship in marginalized communities, if young people don't see anybody invested in their community, they can't have a grocery store in their community. If they don't see creators in their communities, what do? They go look to see places where they belong. That's how kids get caught up in gangs. That's how kids are making poor decisions when they're hungry. And you fall into the juvenile justice system. So what happens when your kid gets caught up in the juvenile justice system? Most kids, most parents do not understand laws and policies, right? So they're signing away their kids' lives for plea deals when they shouldn't be doing that because they don't have the accessibility, they don't have the money to pay off fines, to pay off tickets. And so your kids become caught up in this cycle of fines and fees. What happens when you can't pay your fines and fees? You go to jail. I remember one of my most powerful moments, we were doing a fines and fees discussion with young kids. And there was a little 10-year-old in the room, and she was listening intensely. And this light bulb came on her head, and she said, "You mean to tell me that if you're rich and you pay off your tickets and your fines, you go home, but if you poor, you go to jail?" Absolutely. When we think about these fines and fees and these policies that are created that impact communities, we think about young people who do not understand. Who is this person in this office making these decisions that impact my life? Why don't we have driver's eds in schools? Why is tuition going up? You go up to any kid, sometimes any adult. Do they know who your city managers are? Do they know who their city council is? Because the most impact is made right in your city when it comes to voting. So I'm thinking when young people understand how systems work, when young people have power in how those systems work, we can change the way that society is ran in the future. So when I'm talking about young people being engaged this way, I'm not talking about us talking at young people. I'm not talking about us having them come into a room and they're sitting and listen. We do that sometimes. But 9 times out of 10, when you're seeing anybody in our programming, they're standing right here in the front. They are running these discussions. There's this big question when we have these discussions around community and young people, or just people, disenfranchised people in general. We want you to feel empowered. We want you to feel empowered. But there's a distinct difference between feeling empowered and actually having power. That language matters because we can say all day we want people to feel empowered. But when you actually give people power, you get that resistance to change. Do we actually want people to have power? And that's the question we have to ask ourselves when we're having these conversations, when we're discussing civic engagement, which is all about empowerment. Do we actually want communities to have power? Because that is what changes. And so when we were asking the question, what makes it difficult for people to be in these spaces? Accessibility. Do they have a car to even get here? Gas is super, super high. Are you choosing to come to this event or put food in your refrigerator? When you don't have a grocery store in your community and you have to drive 10 miles to get to the nearest grocery store, but you don't have a car and you can't afford an Uber and DoorDash. It's expensive when they add on all those extra charges. Civic engagement is entrepreneurship. Civic engagement is voting. Civic engagement is health. There are all these things that make these communities go into this cycle. And so one of the things that stand out to me the most, it's been on my spirit for a long time when I'm working with young people. And I grew up in the 90s, but I'm a big fan of 80s music. And so Pat Benatar is one of my favorite singers, y'all. And so her song, We Belong, stands out to me. And when you think about those lyrics, and when I'm trying to teach young people, is that they belong. When we think about talent and this up-and-coming talent in Wichita, we are in a crisis. Is what our talent do? They leave the city and go to spaces where they feel accepted, where they feel invested in, where they feel safe, where they have a better quality of life. And so when I think about Wichita, and the first question I ask the kids, and especially in Camp DI, is this a place where you do feel invested in, will you feel safe, where you want to build in? The whole room at the beginning will say no. Nope, they want to move. Because silos. If you're on the west side, you don't go to the east side. If you go to the east side, you don't go to the west side. If you're on the south side, you're forgotten. You see what I'm saying? And so how can we show these young people that they belong to this city? That's our problem, entrepreneurship, identify the problem. And then we spend the rest of that time coming up with solutions on how they can feel involved in and invested in that city. And that's making these young people understand that they have power and that they don't have to wait till they grow up to sit at these tables. You'll hear me say it 1,000 times, and if you know me, you've heard me say this 1,000 times. We have too many conversations about the future without the future being at the table. And that's why it's so important that we get young people invested in these conversations. If I had it my way, they would have been in this room today. Because power happens when you bring intergenerational into the same space, and we come up with creative ways to engage and make our city better. These young people are powerful, and I will continue to use that word power, because we need to let people know that we're just doing more than the sticker shop. We are more than optics, we are impact. So you will see, I'll tell people all the time when they ask to come talk to any of our young people, we are not a photo op. If you're not invested in these kids, if you're not creating or paving a way, if you're not coming in here to sit with them and help them figure out how they can get to that next level, if all you want to do is come and take a picture with this group because their name is out there right now, I want you to go the other direction. We don't do optics, we do impact. And so when it comes to civic engagement, it's about how much impact you can make. And then understanding that all of us in this room probably has been on this grind for a long time. So when it comes to health and civic engagement, how do we tackle burnout and fatigue? Because sometimes these systems that we are fighting are huge, and the work is huge. And are we really learning as a society? Are we learning from what we're going through? And if we look at the world today, it seems like we're regressing a little bit. So how do we counter that? And my answer is working with young people. They're going to be the game changers. And if we get to them earlier, we can start to see the changes that we want to cultivate in this world. So resource-wise, I work bigly with NetWorked Kansas. I am a fan and a stan because they are authentic in their work and what they do. The CREATE campaign, which invests in minority and women businesses. There are so many Nexus, which you wouldn't believe before when they were, oh my God, I hate when, ETE, which is bad because they were my fiscal sponsors. So before we even became Destination Innovation, Inc., they were invested in us and believed in what we were doing. And so that is what we do. And I am here to help guide and help us navigate this conversation around civic engagement. It's something I'm passionate about. So let's get to it. Mm-hmm.
Any questions?
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah.
I have one.
Okay.
Tell us about, so if we were trying to figure out how to engage you in a civic engagement role, right? Maybe it's the youth perspective. How would that work? How would we partner in that?
So you just reach out to us. Our website is Destination Innovation, Inc. We have our young people root the power. So if you ever want to have a conversation when it comes to anybody that's running for office, because again, in layman's terms, these kids need to understand who does what and how they impact your community. So our young people will come out. They will moderate, they will facilitate, they will host the event, and they'll make sure that they're asking the questions that impact their community as a whole. So you just reach out to us on the Destination Innovation Inc. website. There is a link that takes you to an email that sends emails to us to let us know what you need us to come out and do. So we are actively, all of our programs are actively engaged and out there in the community, and these young people are ready to work. And again, we believe in investment, so all of our kids are paid interns.
What is the age range for your 3 different programs?
So 14 to 25. So Camp DI right now is 14 to 17. Root to Power are high school and college students, so 14 to 25. And Progeny is 14 to 25 years old, because in the juvenile justice system, youth is up to 25.
What are you looking forward? What are you most optimistic about?
Gen Z, they are badass. And I say this to say, these young people, I come from a generation where we were told children should be seen and not heard. These young people will be heard, and they're not accepting of our status quo. So all that generational trauma that we're trying to put on them, if you go on TikTok, they're telling you they're not taking that anymore. They're not carrying our mess anymore. All the things in the family, when you say keep it in the family, keep this hush hush, all the little dark secrets. No, they putting all y'all business out there on TikTok. Because they are refusing to carry the trauma that we give them. And that is powerful. And so what I'm looking forward to is that these young people are very hyper aware. The internet is a blessing and a curse. But through social media, they're learning on world issues, things that are happening in this world. They are aware. They're not in the dark. Like us, we would be on Nickelodeon and watching cartoons in the morning. Them, they can Google anything and be instantly taken there. So these kids are hyper aware of what's going on in their communities, and not just their communities, the whole wide world. And they have questions and they have answers, and they're pissed at us, rightfully so. Because what are we doing? We are passing our mess to the next generation and hoping they carry the baton to change what we can't. When are we going to get tired? You know? Yes, ma'am.
In light of the recent death of young people in our community, has that sparked or innovated any new programming that you thought were going to the kids that you have right now to incite or act on any policy changes?
Absolutely. We do policy a lot in our work. So we have Invest Don't Arrest Kansas. That is what our work with Progeny. That's about doing more restorative justice instead of throwing kids in jail. We feel like it's systemic issues are leading kids to make poor decisions. And until we address those systemic issues, we will continue this cycle of seeing young people get caught up. So we talk about kids killing each other, right? But we never talk about how these guns are getting into these 14-year-old hands. We talk about the drug epidemic that are impacting fentanyl that our kids are taking. But we never talk about how are drugs getting into 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old hands. But you know what we will do? We will arrest them and put them in jail. That's systemic issues. We won't talk about how we don't have access to health care. So you're thinking about a young person that has a toothache. They can't get to the dentist. So they're going to school, and has anybody ever had a toothache before? Oh my God, it's excruciating. So you're going to school, you are in pain. Put your head down on your desk. Your teacher, who is underpaid, overworked, and probably going through economic issues of their own, come in having a bad day. What does she do? She slams the hand on, he or she slams the hand on the desk. The kid gets up aggravated because they are in pain. Those two come together. What happens? You might end up with a kid expelled, in jail, and life goes on for that teacher. You see what I'm saying? And so we're not addressing the systemic issues that get our young people caught up. We're not addressing the fact that we do not have a grocery store in communities. So when kids don't have accessibility to food, healthy food, because you can't get healthy food at a dollar store. I'm a firm believer that a good breakfast at the beginning of the day sustains you. It allows you to have a clear head to learn. And I won't even go into the education system because there's bias that comes into the education system when it comes to our kids. So are we teaching kids how to be innovative, creative? Or are we putting them in box and teaching them how to be sheep and go with the status quo? That doesn't work anymore, because that American dream of going to school, going to college, getting a great job is not real. Yes, ma'am. We can do it. Lean into discomfort.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Regarding the redistricting, are your kids aware of what's happening?
When I tell you that these kids are aware, I wish I had them in the room today. I really wish I had them in the room today, because these young people are aware of redistricting, food inequities. They are aware of the policies that exist when it comes to the juvenile justice system. They are helping create policies around fines and fees work right now. They are aware of all the inequities that exist when it comes to policy in their communities. That's one thing that we want them to understand, is these systems. So yeah, they have an opinion about it. Mm.
Well, can they go to Topeka?
Yeah, so we had plans to go to Topeka. In the beginning, they've been doing virtual. Talks. I'm losing my language today, guys. I've been going nonstop for a month, so I apologize. But yeah, so they've been going to all the virtual convenings. Some of them have been in Topeka. Last month, they were a bunch of them in Topeka, going and giving statements and testimonies. So yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I could talk about this forever, y'all.
How does someone young that is not, so is this only based in Wichita?
It's based in Wichita for now. So Progeny Work is Kansas-based. We're supposed to be Kansas, but we're housed in Wichita right now. Destination Innovation, we're working on doing an outreach with NetWorked Kansas to get it across the state. And Progeny, we're doing the same thing. And our Root to Power, or DI as a whole, we want to teach communities to have hubs of youth leadership and development that tackle these issues, so that these young people are being engaged on the state level at a greater pace or greater rate. Yeah.
How does someone who doesn't live in Kansas, obviously moving out of Kansas to Oklahoma, like do like hands-on work with the youth?
So what we need is a cheerleader. We'll come to you. And so what we need is a cheerleader in each community. So that cheerleader is the person that's going to say, hey, we need this in our city. And we'll come to you and talk about our programming and how it works. And then we can work on building it, getting the investment from communities, from your foundations, so that we can get invested in, and then work on going into the schools and getting the young people engaged. So we can talk about it, definitely.
That's kind of my question as well, like, just question on like the recruitment process, how do you get out in the community, how are they aware of your services, or that you get, like you just mentioned that you're out in the schools and.
So our strongest advocates are our youth. Right now, we're not in, we work indirectly with USD 259 through referrals. We have plans to be in USD 259 next year, so we will be in the schools next year, and we're trying to grow our staff for that. And word of mouth, referrals, social media, we're out there. But parents and our young people are our biggest advocates, yeah, in our community. Yeah, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you
Thank you.
much. So I'm switching roles here just a little bit, from being facilitator to talking about what we do at the Public Policy and Management Center as a resource for all of you. Public Policy and Management Center has been around for over 65 years. It was founded by a rebel that decided that universities should not just sit back and watch the world happen, that they should be actively engaged in this work. His name is Dr. Hugo Wall. He was one of the founders that helped out with the International Association of Police. He helped out with city management. He recommended county management be a form of government in a profession, and was almost ran out of town for these crazy ideas that we should have professional service do this. So I share that this is the legacy that we inherited, right? That we should be actively engaged in the world around us. A little bit about me. I started off as a journalism major, thought, like anybody old enough to remember Woodward and Bernstein, that was me, right? I had gone through school to do that. My junior year in college, I was fortunate to go over to what was then the Soviet Union, now Russia, and spent a month there and actually saw the fall of government, right? Not even democracy, right? Communism fall and the impact that it had on people. So I decided that writing about the problems was pretty easy, right? Going and saying these are the things that are wrong was easy. Going back and saying how in the world do we fix this, that's the hard That's why all of you are here and you're getting up to try to figure out. Not just that exercise we did. That was the easy work, right? Saying what are things that are wrong. How do we possibly fix that? So at the center, we work across the state. I'm proud to say that we, in the last 18 months, have been in 101 counties of Kansas. So we are not just Wichita-based, although that's where we primarily work. We operate as a small business, so we eat what we kill, like many of you. We're not a state-funded organization. We run as a small business. Our mission is to help you have your communities be the best that they can be, right? So that is our job to do that. And we do that in 5 ways that we think is helpful. One, we are data-driven, right? So there are people that relate to stories, and that is really important, and we want to tell those stories. We also want you to have numbers to know what we're doing, what impacts we're having. So we will often say that, right, we will never have enough resources to address all the problems that are out there. We've got to come to different ways to work together. And we have to measure it, right? We have to find out, is this actually having an impact? And that's scary for people, because if it's not, right, we feel like we're failing, right? We feel like, oh no, my program's not good. And if you're a nonprofit, and whatever program you're running, right, doesn't feel like it's making a difference, that gets scary. So we try to do this in a way that says, you know, this is a learning opportunity for everybody about how we get this better. If these problems were easy to solve, it's already been done. We also do a lot of work in engagement and inclusion. There are no problems left that can be solved by a single sector. So that same conversation in there, we believe we have to have everybody at the table. So one of our big projects right now is the Mental Health and Substance Abuse Coalition in Civic Engagement. We have private sector, public sector, nonprofit, citizens, we need youth. Just thinking about that, right, and trying to work together. It is hard, painful work, right? I know, right, because it is systems change, and it is layered with federal, state, local, nonprofit, and there's significant issues, right, with those that have money and those that don't have money in this system and how that works. So we do a lot of engagement and coalition building with. We work a lot with government, especially at the local level. Local government, do we have any local government folks in here? Local government still has the highest rating of folks that are trusted. It is a lessening thing. So if you look at federal government, trust for federal government, trust for state government, trust for local government, that's the only one right now that's batting over 50%, that people still trust their local governments. That is huge. That is huge, right, if we are going to make a difference. So when we talk about civic engagement, running for office, any of those, right, we need to figure that out. We're big believers in diversity of voices, right, and having those in the room. And we do that with intentional work. And diversity of voices means diversity of thought, right? It is race, it is gender, it is physical ability, and we try to bring that into all the conversations that we have. And it's really interesting being based primarily in Wichita, and then when we go to other parts of the state, right, and they'll say, we don't have diversity here, right? That is a common thing that we hear, right? So helping to be that voice of how folks can think about diversity differently is part of the work that we do. We believe that public service is an honorable effort, right? So for those that are saying, right, those who raise their hand and say, I will run, or I will serve, or I will participate, thank you, right? Because we need honorable people in that, and we'll do all that we can to help some more support and promote. And we are nonpartisan, right? We will not, this is not a political effort for us, but it is making sure that we have good people in positions in civil bit. And finally, we believe if we can't be involved to add value in some way to move this needle forward, right, we really want to help define that and to move that work for all of you. There's not anything left, as I said before, that's easy. And there's not anything left that can be done by one organization if it is meaningful work to be done. So how do we figure out how to work together? And for the most part, that's unnatural, right? It is unnatural for these large organizations or even, you know, groups of people to come together to figure out how to do it. So love the remarks, right? It's relationship building one-on-one and ensuring, right, that I believe your intentions are good for not only myself and the world, right, but for the issue we're trying to move forward. So we talk a lot about that in our work and trying to move folks to make impact, and that is not easy. So we do this work in a lot of different ways. We have trainings that we do where we're actively engaged in efforts for that. So we do a lot of professional and talent development. We do a lot of work in the area of community engagement. I said this earlier, we believe it's a full contact sport, and we are big believers in the wedding crasher approach. So getting people to come to an event like this is rare. Only Christina could pull that off, right? So in doing civic engagement, we believe you go to them. So we have had discussions at the McDonald's, we have had discussions in the church basements, we have had discussions, right, where you are leading it and sending it back. So, as creative as you can get, because you cannot continue to do the work as it has been done. Less than 10% of the population will ever go to a community meeting held by local government, whether that's school district or local government or state agency. So going to Topeka, right, that you get folks to do that, that's rare. Less than 10% of the population will do that because it is intimidating and they don't believe it'll make a difference, right? So how do we start changing that to go to them to do this work? I think that's all I have to share to say. We were glad to talk, give consult, and help to move this forward. We're really glad to be a part of this today. So, any questions for me?